How are you guys doing? Today is Wednesday, March 31st, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to review the Elite performances and matchups from yesterday, Tuesday, March 30th. And of course, I'm going to preview everything that goes on today as we end out March 2021. With the NFL no longer in season and the MLB picking up its season tomorrow, I'm going to get started with the NBA. Looking at the primetime matchup from yesterday, the Denver Nuggets hosted the Philadelphia 76ers, and in this matchup, the Denver Nuggets would beat the Eastern Conference leading Philadelphia 76ers 104-95. The Sixers really tried to come back. They outscored the Nuggets by 10 points in the second half, but it will be the Nuggets winning this one, the biggest difference being the first quarter where they outscored the Philadelphia 76ers 44-22, doubling their score and carrying that momentum through the end of the game. For the Philadelphia 76ers, their leading scorer would come off the bench as their point guard off the bench, Tyrese Maxey, would finish with 13 points in 16 minutes, shooting 4 for 9 from the field and a perfect 4 for 4 from the line. And then out of the starters, the leading scorer was their starting power forward, Tobias Harris, who finished with 12 points and 2 steals as well as 2 blocks in 26 minutes. Shooting 6 for 13 from the field. And alongside those guys, their elite starting point guard, Ben Simmons, would finish with 11 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals in 26 minutes as he shot 4 for 7 from the field and 3 for 4 from the foul line. For the Denver Nuggets in this matchup, their leading scorer would be their elite starting point guard, Jamal Murray, who finished with 30 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 steals in 38 minutes, shooting 12 for 24 from the field, 5 for 11 from 3, and he made his only free throw of the night. Their starting small forward, Michael Porter Jr. out of Missouri, would finish with 27 points, 12 rebounds in 36 minutes as he shot 11 for 16 from the field and 5 for 7 from 3. And then their elite starting center, Nikola Jokic, would finish with 21 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists alongside 6 turnovers in 34 minutes as Jokic shot 8 for 14 from the field and 5 for 6 from the foul line. With this win, the Denver Nuggets are now 29-18. Looking out west, that is the 5th best record as they've now won their last 3 games and 7 of their last 10. In the playoff picture, they sit a game behind the 4th seed defending champs Los Angeles Lakers, and they also sit half a game ahead of the 6th place Portland Trailblazers as they trail the 1st place Utah Jazz by 6.5 games in the West. And with this loss, the Philadelphia 76ers are now 32-15. They are now tied with the Brooklyn Nets for the best record in the Eastern Conference as they have now lost their last 2, but they still won 7 of their last 10. Now that they're tied with the Brooklyn Nets in the playoff picture, they sit 2.5 games ahead of the 3rd place Milwaukee Bucks at the moment. And that's where the Sixers sit right now. Jumping out to Washington, D.C., the Washington Wizards hosted the Charlotte Hornets. In this matchup, it would be the Hornets beating the Wizards 114-104, the difference being the first half where they outscored the Wizards by 8. For the Wizards in this matchup, their leading scorer would be their starting power forward out of Gonzaga, Rui Hachimura, who finished with 30 points in 40 minutes, shooting 12 for 25 from the field, 1 for 2 from 3, and 5 for 5 from the foul line, as he was also able to add 4 rebounds and 3 assists on his night. And then their elite starting point guard, Russell Westbrook, would finish with 22 points, 15 rebounds, 14 assists, and a couple of steals alongside 5 turnovers in 38 minutes as he shot 7 for 20 from the field, 4 for 9 from 3, and 4 for 6 from the foul line. For the Charlotte Hornets, their leading scorer would be their starting shooting guard, Terry Rozier, who finished with 27 points and 7 rebounds in 39 minutes, shooting 10 for 20 from the field, 5 for 10 from 3, and a perfect 2 for 2 from the line. And alongside him, their starting small forward, Gordon Hayward out of Butler, finished with 26 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists in 39 minutes, shooting 9 for 19 from the field, a perfect 3 for 3 from the line, and 5 for 6 from the foul line. With this win, the Charlotte Hornets are now 24-22. That is the 4th best record in the Eastern Conference as they have now won 6 of their last 10 games. In the playoff picture, they sit 5 games behind the 3rd place Milwaukee Bucks, and they sit half a game ahead of the 5th place New York Knicks. In the Eastern Conference, they sit 7.5 games behind the 1st place Philadelphia 76ers and Brooklyn Nets, just to give a sense of where the Hornets are. And with this loss, the Wizards are now 17-29. That is the 4th worst record in the Eastern Conference as they have now lost 7 of their last 10. They currently sit 5.5 games behind the 8th place Miami Heat and 7th place Boston Celtics outside of the playoff picture as they trail the Sixers and Nets by 14.5 games in the conference. Jumping out to Los Angeles into the Staples Center, the Los Angeles Clippers hosted the Orlando Magic, and in this matchup, the Magic would end up they would enter the fourth quarter trailing by 3, and then they would end up winning by 7 after they outscored the Clippers by 10 points in the fourth quarter. The Clippers actually had the lead until very late, until the Orlando Magic shifted the tide, of course, with a couple of great dunks from former NBA Rookie of the Year Michael Carter Williams, and then of course Wendell Carter would get the tip in that would turn the tide, and then the Magic would run away with it. For the Los Angeles Clippers in this matchup, their leading scorer would be their goated small forward, Kawhi Leonard, who finished with 28 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists in 35 minutes, shooting 10 for 20 from the field, 2 for 4 from 3, and a perfect 6 for 6 from the foul line. For the Orlando Magic, their leading scorer would be their starting power forward, this would be Chuma Okeke. Chuma Okeke for the night would finish with 18 points in 28 minutes, as he ended up with 3 steals as well. He shot 7 for 11 from the field and a perfect 3 for 3 from the line. And with this win, the Orlando Magic are now 16-31. That is the second worst record in the Eastern Conference, as they've only won 3 of their last 10 games. They currently sit 7 games behind the 7 seed Boston Celtics and the 8 seed Miami Heat, outside of the playoff picture looking in, as they currently trail the 76ers and the Nets by 16 total games in the conference. With this loss, the Los Angeles Clippers are now 32-17. That is the third best record in the Western Conference, as they've still won 7 of their last 10 despite this loss. In the playoff picture, they sit a game and a half behind the second-place Phoenix Suns, and they sit 1 game ahead of their Staples Center roommates, the defending champs 4-seed Los Angeles Lakers. And they currently sit 4.5 games behind the first-place Utah Jazz in the conference. And last but not least, jumping to Phoenix, Arizona, the Phoenix Suns hosted the Atlanta Hawks and were able to pull off the 117-110 win. The difference being the first half, where they outscored Atlanta by 12 points and just carried that momentum through the end of the game. For the Atlanta Hawks, their leading scorer would be their starting shooting guard, Bogdan Bogdanovic, who finished with 22 points, 6 assists, and 4 steals in 37 minutes, shooting 8 for 18 from the field, 4 for 8 from 3, and a perfect 2 for 2 from the foul line. And then their elite starting point guard, Trae Young, would finish with 19 points, 2 rebounds, 13 assists, and 3 steals in 33 minutes, as he shot 5 for 16 from the field, 1 for 4 from 3, and 8 for 9 from the foul line. For the Phoenix Suns in this matchup, their leading scorer would be their elite starting shooting guard, Devin Booker, who finished with 21 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists in 33 minutes, shooting 8 for 19 from the field, 2 for 7 from 3, and 3 for 3 from the foul line. Off the bench, their power forward, Dario Saric, would finish with 20 points and 5 rebounds in 18 minutes, shooting 7 for 8 from the field, a perfect 3 for 3 from the three-point line, and 3 for 4 from the foul line. And then once again, alongside Devin Booker in the starting lineup, their elite starting point guard, Chris Paul, would finish with 12 points, 3 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 steals in 31 minutes, as he shot 5 for 10 from the field and a perfect 2 for 2 from the foul line. With this win, the Phoenix Suns are now 32-14. That is the second best record in the Western Conference. They have the same amount of wins as the Clippers, but they have 3 less losses. The Suns have now won their last 3 games and 7 of their last 10. In the playoff picture, they sit 3 games behind the first place Utah Jazz, and they sit a game and a half ahead of the third place Los Angeles Clippers out west. And with this loss, the Atlanta Hawks are now 23-24. That now ties them with the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat for the 6th best record in the Eastern Conference, as they have now lost their last 2 games. They still won 6 of their last 10. In the playoff picture, they sit 1 game behind the 5th place New York Knicks. And the Hawks, the Celtics, and the Heat also sit 1 game ahead of the 9th place Indiana Pacers, who are on the outside looking in at the very moment. That is what the NBA looks like following yesterday's games, and looking forward to what's going on today for the last day of March, starting with the primetime matchups. At 7:30, the Boston Celtics will host the Dallas Mavericks on ESPN. The Celtics tied with the Hawks and the Heat for the 6th best record in the Eastern Conference, and then the Mavericks are sitting with the 7th best record in the Western Conference, so both these teams need a win as of right now in the season. And then following that, it'll be a 10 o'clock matchup between the Los Angeles Lakers, the 4th seed in the West, and the Milwaukee Bucks, who are currently holding the 3rd best record in the Eastern Conference. With the win here, the Bucks could get their 30th win of the season, and that they currently have 1 less win than the Lakers, so they're sitting pretty much even though the Lakers are missing LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And then outside of the games that are on prime time, at 7 o'clock, the Detroit Pistons will host the Portland Trailblazers. The Detroit Pistons are the current holders of the worst record in the Eastern Conference. And also at the same time, the Indiana Pacers will host the Miami Heat, as the Pacers are sitting on the outside of the playoff picture looking in. A win here could very easily see them jump the Miami Heat. And then at 7:30, the Brooklyn Nets are going to host the Houston Rockets, as James Harden's going to face off against his former team. At 8 o'clock, the Memphis Grizzlies are going to host the Utah Jazz, who currently hold the best record in the NBA. At the same time, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who hold the worst record in the NBA, are going to host the New York Knicks. The Oklahoma City Thunder are also going to host the Toronto Raptors at 8 o'clock. And then at 8:30, the San Antonio Spurs are going to host the Sacramento Kings. And then at 10 o'clock, the Phoenix Suns are going to host the Chicago Bulls on the second night of a back-to-back. Jumping really quickly to college basketball, this was the second day for both the men's and the women's tournament in the Elite Eight, as both Final Four matchups have they've officially been set up. Starting off with the men's bracket, jumping to the final matchup of the West region. It was a 1-6 matchup between 1 seed Gonzaga and 6 seed USC. And in this matchup, Gonzaga would end up beating USC 85-66 after outscoring them 49-30 in the first half. They were, of course, led by their freshman guard Jalen Suggs, who had 18 points, 10 rebounds, and 8 assists, as Gonzaga now jumps to 30-0 on the season. With this win, they will advance to face off against UCLA, 11 seed UCLA, who ended up beating 1 seed Michigan in the East, 51-49. After they had a better first half. They outscored Michigan by 4 in the first half, and Michigan outscored them by 2 in the second. But UCLA would still hold the lead. Michigan would have a chance to win it, but they would end up missing the 2 shot attempts that they had. They would end up fouling, and UCLA would end up running away with it. And then their top performer would be their guard Johnny Juzang, their sophomore guard who transferred from Kentucky, who from the Valley, went to the same middle school as me. He finished with 28 points. He finished with 28 of the UCLA 51 points. The rest of the team scored 23, as Johnny Juzang was able to kind of put the team on his back and advance them. And now in the Final Four, they will face off against Gonzaga. The Final Four matchups between Baylor and Houston and Gonzaga and UCLA will take place on Saturday, April the 3rd. And then jumping really quickly to see what's going on with the women's side of the bracket, they're at the same stage, whereas the teams in the tournament would drop from 6 to 4, as the Elite Eight would finish up yesterday. Just looking out to how it fared. Starting in the Hemisphere Region Final, 1 seed South Carolina was able to beat 6 seed Texas 62-34, after they were able to hold Texas to 7 points in the first quarter, and they held them to 0 points in the entire fourth quarter, and able to advance themselves to the next round on a very impressive outing. They were led by their forward, Letitia Amahire, with 10 points and 8 rebounds. And following this, after they outscored Texas 25-12 in the second half, and all 12 of Texas's points were in the third quarter, they will advance to face off against Stanford in the Final Four. Stanford would end up winning the Alamo Region Final yesterday after beating 2 seed Louisville 78-63. The difference would come in the fourth quarter. They came into the fourth quarter trailing by 1, but then they would outscore Louisville 30-13. They outscored them by 17 to come back from being down 2 to win by 17, led by Ashton Pretchell, who had 16 points and 4 assists. And with this win, 1 seed Stanford from the Alamo region will face off against 1 seed South Carolina from the Hemisphere region on Friday. That will be the first matchup, and then following that, it'll be 1 seed UConn and 3 seed Arizona, and that's how the NCAA Women's Final Four is going to be set up. And switching the context, staying within the arena, but now switching to the ice, looking out to what's going on in the NHL. Of course, it's needed. You got to know that every team has to stay within their own division. So knowing that, jumping north of the Canadian border, the Montreal Canadiens hosted the Edmonton Oilers and were able to pull up a 4-0 win after they scored 3 goals in the first period. With their 15th win of the season, the Montreal Canadiens are now holding on to the 4th best record of the North Division, as they trail the first place Maple Leafs by 8 points in the table, as they have played 3 less games than them. So they are in position to possibly jump them if they win their next couple of games. Jumping out to the East Division, the Boston Bruins hosted the New Jersey Devils and were able to pull off a 5-4 win in the shootout. Their center, Krejci, would finish with 3 assists on the night, and after picking up their 18th win of the season, the Boston Bruins are now sitting 4th in the East Division as they trail the first-place Capitals by 9 points in the table, even though they've played 3 less games than the Capitals at the moment. Jumping out to Madison Square Garden, the New York Rangers hosted the Washington Capitals and were able to pull off a 5-2 win. They came into the third period trailing 2-1, but they scored 4 goals in the third period to go up. They were led by their left winger, Panarin, who finished with a goal and 2 assists. And with their 16th win of the season, the Rangers are now sitting with the 6th best record in the East Division as they trail the Capitals by 14 total points in the table. And then jumping out really quickly to the Central, the Columbus Blue Jackets went to Tampa Bay to face off against the Lightning, and they were able to pull off their 14th win of the season, winning 3-1. After picking up their 14th win of the season, the Columbus Blue Jackets are now sitting with the 6th best record in the division as they trail the Lightning and the Panthers by 14 points in the table. Jumping out to Miami, the Florida Panthers hosted the Detroit Red Wings, were able to pull off a 4-1 win as 3 of their goals came in the first period. Their center, Verhaeghe, would finish with 2 goals himself, and with their 23rd win of the season, the Panthers are tied with the Lightning at the top of the table, as they both sit 1 point ahead of the Carolina Hurricanes, who went to Chicago and lost to the Blackhawks 2-1. And there were, of course, the goals coming for Chicago from Strome and DeBrincat. After picking up their 17th win of the season, the Chicago Blackhawks are now sitting 5th in the Central as they now trail they're tied for 4th with the Predators as they trail the Lightning and the Panthers by 11 points. And then speaking of the Predators hosted the Dallas Stars and were able to pull off a 3-2 win in overtime to pick up their 19th win of the season. With this win, the Predators are tied with the Blackhawks for the 4th best record in the division as they trail the Lightning and Panthers by 11 points in the division. Those were all the games from yesterday. Looking out to what's going on today, starting with the primetime matchups. The only primetime matchup will be on NBC Sports Network between the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the team sitting at the top of the West, and the Los Angeles Kings. Outside of that game, at 7:30, the Winnipeg Jets will host the Toronto Maple Leafs, and at 7:30 at the same time, the Buffalo Sabres, who have the worst record in the NHL, will host the Philadelphia Flyers. At 10:30, the Vancouver Canucks will host the Calgary Flames, and at the same time, the San Jose Sharks will host the Minnesota Wild, and that's everything that's going on with hockey. Last but not least, jumping to see what's going on with soccer in the rest of the world. I would say other than the big news that Robert Lewandowski got seriously injured yesterday, there was still a good amount of World Cup qualifying matches. First off, Belgium was able to beat Belarus 8-0, kind of playing their second team. So that was a very big big win for them. Croatia was able to beat Malta 3-0 as their second goal would be a penalty kick from their elite center attacking mid, Luka Modric. The Netherlands would end up beating Gibraltar 7-0. As Memphis Depay would get 2 goals and Donny van de Beek would get a goal of his own. Portugal would end up beating Luxembourg 3-1 as their second goal would come from their goated forward for Juventus, Cristiano Ronaldo. Norway would end up beating Montenegro 1-0 as well. And that's pretty much everything that was going on with qualifiers in Europe. And really quickly jumping out to see what's going on today because there's more qualifiers going on. Just going down the list to tell you the order in which they're playing. At 2:45, Bosnia is going to host they're going to host France, the winners of the last World Cup. At 2:45, it'll be a match between England and Poland as Robert Lewandowski will not be playing in this game. He's been ruled out for the next 4 weeks. At the same time, Germany will face off against North Macedonia coming off their last win, their very dominant last win. Italy will face off against Lithuania at the same time as Italy is looking like a very strong team too. Spain is going to face off against Kosovo. That's everything you got to look forward to today, especially with international soccer. With that said, once again, today is Wednesday, March 31st, 2021 out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims. Once again, this is The Elite, and I will get back to you tomorrow on Thursday, April 1st, with the beginning of baseball, of course, and with a rundown from today's elite matchups and performances. Thanks once again for listening to all 19 minutes of my piece. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Peace out.